All right, good afternoon, Cedarfield. How has everybody been? It's been a few weeks since we've had a show, so I'm glad to be back. Unfortunately, this is kind of a one-off because then I'll have a few weeks off after this. I'm going on vacation and next week, and then the next week I will have just gotten back from vacation, so I'll probably won't be prepared for a show then, and I think there were several events going on and it was just easier just to skip the week. So you'll enjoy this show, and then we'll have a few weeks off and we'll come back ready to go, and hopefully May will be a little more consistent because I won't have any more vacations. I'll have that all done and out of the way. But anyway, I'm excited to be here. It is springtime officially, and which means Easter is right around the corner. So I thought, well, this is the appropriate week to talk about eggs, right? Because Easter and eggs go hand in hand. The one thing that has never occurred to me when I was kind of doing some research about Easter eggs and the history of Easter eggs and things is we so much associate Easter with eggs, and then we also associate Easter with bunnies, right? Easter bunny. And then there's kind of that picture of the Easter bunny with his little basket delivering the eggs, which kind of implies that the eggs came from the bunny. So I thought that was kind of an interesting little concept that I've never considered. And that, we associate eggs and bunnies at Easter time, and they don't have anything to do with each other. I have no idea how that came to be. I mean, I guess it's just, whatever. Holidays just kind of morph into these crazy things sometimes over the centuries of traditions and stuff. But we will talk about some of the specifics of the history of the Easter egg, and we'll leave the bunnies out of it today. All right, so the egg itself is typically in ancient cultures, especially like pagan cultures, it's typically a sign or a symbol of new life and rebirth, which makes sense because I have a friend who has some chickens in her backyard, and I never knew that usually during the winter time, hens kind of take a break from laying eggs. I guess, whatever kind of biological cycles they have, they may lay a few, but not very many. And then in the springtime, as weather warms up, their cycle picks back up and they start laying eggs again. And I don't know, maybe that has to do with the nutrients not being available in the ground, or I'm not sure. But so kind of, in the springtime, eggs become more plentiful and bountiful. And so I guess that's kind of how they are associated with just that general rebirth of spring. And it is kind of like we call like baby season, and with the baby animals all being born at this time of the year, it's always kitten season, and you find all the little baby birds around this time of the year. So it does definitely make sense. So as far as the Easter egg though, as Easter, like a lot of Christian holidays, they are kind of an amalgamation of some of the like pagan traditions kind of morphed into some Easter or Christian traditions. So Easter is no exception. And during the period of Lent, which we're in right now, this is back in like ancient Christianity, like in the 12th and 13th centuries. They would abstain from meat, the flesh of slain animals or slaughtered animals for the whole period of Lent. And so then there was kind of that question of dairy products or milk, and then also eggs. And so some people say yes, some people say no, but there was a time when eggs and milk were included in those foods that you had to abstain from during Lent. So you've got all of a sudden this, abundance of eggs being laid, but all these Christians weren't allowed to eat them. So there were kind of just these eggs accumulating. Well, back in those days, still today, they didn't have refrigeration, so they weren't able to store their eggs, or the meat. So, they were refraining from meat, but eggs were being laid, and eggs can actually survive, or they stay good and fresh for a long period of time. So maybe not the entire 6 weeks, but for several weeks eggs can still remain fresh. So people would save their eggs, and then then, once Easter came and they could, break the fast and they could start eating, animal foods again, that's how, the eggs became a tradition of like a traditional food on Easter Sunday, because then suddenly we could eat those eggs again. So they would get decorated during the Lenten season as they were being stored, and they were given out as gifts and things like that. So that is how the Easter egg came to be. So then to kind of hop on to a different story, which I find very interesting. I never knew this story, and when I was researching it, I thought I have to share this because it's just so typical of today's times, even though this is a historic story. So apparently, so all these children would get decorated Easter eggs on Easter Sunday, and then, would typically maybe have a holiday on Monday, and so they'd be home from school and they're bored. So that's kind of, kids would go out into the streets, into their yards, and they would race, they roll the eggs down the hills and down the streets and have egg races, etc. So that became a tradition, going back way, way back. So the children in Washington, D.C. were no exception. So you've probably heard about the Easter roll on the White House lawn every year. It takes place on that Monday after Easter, which is kind of that traditional day that kids would be out playing with their new eggs, their decorated eggs. So I looked up the history of the White House Easter egg roll, and I just thought it was a great story. It's so typical of politics, and it's a story I could see taking place today, just like it did back then. So apparently back in 1878, it was this typical tradition of kids rolling their eggs around in the hills of DC. And a lot of kids would gather on Capitol Hill and the grounds of the actual Capitol building and roll their eggs down the hill. And they caused such a ruckus, and so many kids came, and they were making so much noise and having so much fun, kids just being kids. And they were actually causing a lot of damage to the grass. So the grumpy politicians who were in their offices trying to work were being distracted by the kids out having a good time. So like a typical grumpy old man or old politician, they literally told the kids to get off their lawn. And they kind of went out and they chased all the kids away. And they even passed a law called the Turf Protection Law to keep the kids from playing on their grounds, which is just, typical of some of our less than fun politicians. Not all politicians are grumpy, but they don't always have a good reputation. Anyway, so they passed this law which stated that the Capitol grounds could not be used as a playground, or no activities could take place on the grounds that would cause destruction to the campus or to the grass or whatever. So the next year, the kids all showed up regardless of this law and tried to get on the lawn to play, and the police shooed them away. And so our nice and generous Rutherford B. Hayes, who was the president at the time, as a way to kind of counter, maybe to try to make nice with his constituents, and make the silly, grumpy, senators and congressmen look bad, he invited all the kids over to the White House to roll their eggs down the front lawn of the White House. And so that was the first White House egg roll in 1878, and then that tradition has carried on today. So I just thought that was a funny, typical story. Like I said, I could see it happening here today. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the nutrition aspect of eggs, because there is always that burning question: are eggs good or bad? What is it? Eggs are one of those foods that they're good, then they're bad, then they're good, then they're bad. So I am here to tell you today, the consensus is, research shows eggs are good. So please do not shy away from including eggs as part of a healthy, balanced diet. Eggs are an excellent source of protein, lots of vitamins and minerals, especially vitamin A, vitamin D, some good omega-3 fatty acids, which are great for your brain, and also good antioxidants. There's also some minerals in eggs like selenium and iodine that can be hard to get from other foods. So there's really nothing negative about eggs. other than the whole cholesterol issue. So we'll get into that a little bit. So the reason eggs got on the bad list for a while is because they are really high in cholesterol. They're one of the highest, food, or one of the foods that provide the highest amounts of cholesterol, like per serving, whatever. So shrimp is another one, and cholesterol was one, or eggs are one. So that is why they were put on this bad list, because higher levels of serum cholesterol, which is, when you go get your cholesterol levels checked by your doctor, they take a blood test, and so the cholesterol levels in your bloodstream are considered your serum cholesterol, and that is what can lead to increased risk of heart disease, etc. However, the recent research has shown that dietary cholesterol, which is cholesterol you eat it with food, so like an egg, does not really contribute to a rise in serum cholesterol. So our bodies can actually make cholesterol as well. So there's a big difference in eating, taking in cholesterol through food, and the fact that that does not really affect that serum cholesterol level that you're gonna, get done through a blood test. So what is affecting that cholesterol level that you get through your blood test, the serum cholesterol, is really saturated fat. So the catch to that, the catch-22, so, cholesterol isn't really the culprit anymore. It's the saturated fat that's causing the problem. But the crux is that most foods that are high in saturated fat are also higher in cholesterol. They kind of just go hand in hand. And these are typically foods that come from animal products or animal foods. So meat, but then also eggs and dairy products. So eggs are kind of an exception, same with shrimp, as I mentioned earlier, because they are higher in cholesterol, but they're lower in saturated fat, considering it's a food from an animal. So that's why they've kind of gotten kicked back onto the good list, because they don't have as much saturated fat. There's a lot of benefits to eating an egg, all the other stuff that has in it. And then that cholesterol in the egg is not really going to affect you like we thought it did. Okay, so with all of that being said, the American Heart Association recommends that eating an average of 1 egg a day is perfectly healthy. However, if you do have really high cholesterol and you're struggling to manage it, they do recommend maybe limiting the yolks to about 3 per week, because it's the yolk that has all the cholesterol. So you could just stick to egg whites to kind of reduce that cholesterol level if it's something that you're struggling with. If you don't really have a problem with high cholesterol, then you stick to that 1 egg a day and you should be fine. All right, so another thing to take into consideration is that typically when we eat eggs, usually it's in the morning for breakfast. What else are we eating usually with those eggs? We're eating the bacon and the sausage and the cheese, right? All that good stuff, butter. And I agree it's delicious, but sometimes the eggs in themselves are really good, but then when you start to load them up with all of that other stuff, then it can really cause a problem. So, because it's that bacon and the sausage that's going to contribute to the sodium and the high cholesterol. So maybe try mixing your omelets or your scrambled eggs with some veggies or mushrooms or something like that. And maybe skip the salt and try some salt-free seasonings. This morning, I can make a recommendation. I had some leftover salmon from lunch the other day, and I scrambled my eggs with some of that salmon and added some avocado, and it was delicious. And I don't even think I put some salt in it. It was good just the way it was. It was very filling and lots of good healthy fats and protein. Okay, so what about, let's see, I've covered everything. So what about all of the labels you see on eggs? So when you go and buy your eggs at the store, you might see, you have all the different sizes of eggs, and then there's free range, and there's cage free, and there's pasture raised, and there's organic, and then there's brown versus white, and then there's all the color, the speckled and everything. So let's talk a little bit about all those different things. So some of those labels are very loosely regulated. And they don't always mean as like what they sound like. So free range just simply means that the chickens have access to walk around and get out of their cages. Doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing it. So a lot of times They're in their coops or whatever, these massive, gigantic coops that are probably as big as this room, and they might have like a tiny little door that they can go out of if they want and walk around free range, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they do it. So, the chickens probably aren't reaping the benefits of that nice pasture that they can feed from, and the exercise they're getting from walking around, whatever. So cage-free is similar to that label in that the chickens are not kept in those individual cages, but they're probably in some sort of a big mass coop or warehouse or whatever. And again, they aren't necessarily in a cage, but they're not necessarily out in a pasture either. Again, reaping the benefits of exercise and eating the grass and the natural, nutrients that are in the pasture. So those are some loose terms. So if ethics is important to you in your eggs, I would I would try to find a reputable source of eggs, maybe a local farmer or someone where for a fact that they are, treating their chickens humanely and giving them the access to free range and cage-free environments, and the chickens are actually taking advantage of that. Okay, and then the organic label simply means that the chickens are strictly fed an organic feed, but this does not mean that they are cage-free or free range, and it also does not mean that they are pasture-fed. So it just means they're being fed some kind of, prefab feed, but it is organic. And then pasture-fed are chickens who, will eat exclusively, they are probably more out there roaming and eating the grass and things that are in the grass, and the bugs and things that are in the grass. So if those are things that are really important to you, do your research and find some reputable sources. But a lot of times those labels can be a little gimmicky, and they can also be an excuse to charge you more for eggs. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then there's also the whole brown egg, white egg controversy. So the color of the egg comes from the breed of the hen. So it has nothing to do with nutritional value. There's no nutritional difference between a brown egg and a white egg. It just has to do with who laid the egg. Same with the blue eggs and the different colors and the speckles and things like that. So that strictly just has to do with the breed. So that again is a little trick. And I mean, it might make sense that they are charging you more because maybe they don't have as many, maybe it's like a supply and demand thing where people want those brown eggs because they think they're healthier or whatever. So maybe they don't have as many of the hens that lay the brown eggs, so they can charge a little more. I don't know, but it is kind of a gimmick. So don't think that they're healthier just because they're brown, or that they're more reputable, whatever. So again, do your research if those are types of things that you're interested in or looking for. And then the yolk, the color of the yolk, that really, because sometimes when you go and you buy fresh eggs, like maybe at a farmer's market, you'll notice that deep, rich orange color of the yolk. And that typically just has to do with what the hen was fed. So if their diet consists more of yellow corn or maybe some flowers or grasses or grains that have darker pigments, you'll see a darker yolk. And then if they're eating more white corn, and just maybe some like plain grains or whatever, then the yolks will probably be a bit lighter of a color. All right, so storing your eggs, again, this is another controversy. If you got your eggs from a grocery store and they've been refrigerated, then you should keep them refrigerated. The question always comes up about fresh eggs and whether you need to refrigerate them. So the politically correct answer is yes, you should refrigerate even fresh eggs. From a food safety perspective, that is the way to not guarantee, but to reduce your risk the most of salmonella issues, things like that. But fresh eggs do keep and stay fresh outside of, on your counter, not in the refrigerator. Do I keep my fresh eggs in the refrigerator? No, but I probably should, and you should too. That's the right answer. But you should wait to wash your eggs until you eat you're ready to eat them, because they do have, especially your fresh eggs, the process of the egg coming out of the chicken provides it with a kind of a protective coating. So you should want to keep that coating on there. That's why a lot of times when you buy fresh eggs, they've got the feathers still stuck on them and maybe some crusty stuff, but that is also protecting the egg. So sometimes you want to keep that on there to keep it protected. If you bought them from a grocery store, all of that has probably already been washed off, and they have probably maybe put some, I don't know what they do to, if they process them and put a protective coating on them of some sort, I'm not sure. But. All right. So I think, I'm trying to see if there's anything else exciting. Oh yeah, we talked about that. So another little fun fact about eggs, I think this is the last thing I'll say, and then we'll wrap up, is double yolks. So sometimes you might get a surprise if you crack open an egg and you might find 2 yolks. I have never had that happen to me, but apparently there is a 1 in 1,000 chance that you will get a double yolk. And I mean, I think this is, you know, I don't know the biological explanation. I assume it's kind of like something like having twins for humans. But superstitions, some people claim that getting a double yolk is good luck. Some people claim it's bad luck. Some people claim that that means you will have twins. If you're beyond childbearing age, maybe it means someone you know will have twins. Who knows? It might just be something exciting to go, oh, I got a double yolk, and then that's the end of it. But anyway, just know you know that you only had a 1 in 1,000 chance of getting that, so you can consider yourself lucky. All right, so hopefully, you know, we didn't really clear up the mystery of why the egg and the, what came first, the bunny or the egg kind of thing, and why bunnies and eggs became associated with each other. I think it's just one of those great Easter mysteries. But hopefully we cleared up some other information about eggs and gave you some fun facts, some good elevator stories about eggs. But I really enjoyed that story about the Easter at the White House. So I'm excited, at least, that I learned that. Hopefully you are too. So, like I said, we will be taking the next 2 weeks off, and then we will be back after that. It'll be May already by then, which is crazy, but so I will see you all then. In the meantime, have a really happy Easter. Enjoy your eggs, and we'll see you soon.